Off top in 1973, the Nathan's hot dog eating contest was won by a 14-year-old named Michael Rabin. But because of the meat shortage, Nathan's has kept it secret, which is why his name is not on the list of champions. Play music!
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
All right, welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. One of my favorite things, as loyal listeners and viewers will know, is not warning a brand new guest of the Off Top. So we're welcoming in a new guest, John Fanta, Fox Sports broadcaster, reporter for college basketball. And right now he seems like the go-to guy for all Dan Hurley conversations. So we're so grateful for you to join us.
Thank you, fellas. It's great to be with you. I'm happy to be a first-time guest on the show. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, it's been a little bit busy in the Dan Hurley cycle, if you will, over the last 96 hours. Just a very eventful 5-day stretch and cycle. And at the end of the day, he is staying in stores, which creates several different effects and has several different layers to it. A lot of layers to this storyline to begin with.
The number one most awesome and exciting thing is college basketball is still exciting and interesting. Like, that was the biggest concern for me, was like, Dan Hurley going to the NBA does not make me any more excited about watching next basketball season. Dan Hurley leaving college basketball with a three-peat on the line in the most in the only dynasty right now in college basketball, him leaving that made me really sad. So I'm happy he's staying.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point in this, is that Dan Hurley has pictures of John Wooden in his office and looks as Wooden as an inspiration. He looks at John Wooden as the guy that he wants to be mentioned in the same breath as, and that's pretty strong company. It's one thing to already be one of only 3 coaches in the last 40 years that could say they've gone back-to-back, joining Billy Donovan and Mike Krzyzewski. By the way, Dan's brother, Bobby, was on those Mike Krzyzewski teams that went back-to-back, and Bobby now at Arizona State. Dan has forever lived in the shadow of his dad and of his brother. That's no more. He's the king of his family. He's a Northeast guy. He's got enough clout and power in Connecticut that he got the governor of the state to break yesterday and say, you know what, we'll give Dan the money to make him the highest paid college coach. Now, I think that guys, that's what's going to be interesting here to see how that transpires, because Bill Self was just made the highest paid college coach this past November with a 5-year, $53 million deal that included $13 million in year one of that contract. So what gets done? If the governor's words turn into results, what Hurley ends up making in his new deal is not going to be that far off from the Lakers. So that's one of my biggest takeaways here, is what the Lakers offered. But for Hurley, he has been outspoken about his mental health. He's found a place, and I admire him for that too. He's found a place of happiness, a place of basketball nirvana. He got Alex Karaban to stay at UConn. Karaban could have been an end of first-round draft pick. He brought in a 5-star freshman very late, a kid named Liam McNeely, who I think people are going to love watch playing. He did these things. He built this team. He's going to make a huge paycheck. And when it's all said and done, if he accomplishes the goal that he has for this upcoming season and three-peats in this current college basketball climate of chaos, I think that'd be harder than what John Wooden accomplished, because everything's changing.
Holy hot damn, you're good. You answered like 13 questions, and I only asked one. Charlie, here's something that he's not ready for.
So I got to ask you about this. He's turned down the Lakers, the prestige NBA franchise. He's turned down Kentucky, one of the blue blood college basketball powers, one of the great jobs in college sports. Does that make you think that Hurley is going to be a UConn lifer?
Not necessarily yet, Charlie. He could be, and life would be fine, and he could win multiple other titles. But he tells all his players, and I had heard that he told someone very close to him on Saturday when he was weighing this decision. I tell all my players when I recruit them, I aspire to be an NBA coach. Now, that's part of the recruiting pitch, that he runs NBA-type sets. He's got that attention to detail, all of that. But guys, I think that for me, what this comes down to is that the Lakers are that great restaurant back in your hometown that you went to as a kid. And now you go back to that restaurant when you return home for a weekend. You walk in, the menu has the same items. Then the food shows up and you say, this sandwich is nothing like what I was used to as a kid. Or I don't remember this. I don't remember this chicken parmesan being like this. It was better. It tasted better. The Lakers here, they lowballed Hurley. I don't know how that gets out into the fray, because when this initially broke, the thought was they're going to have to pay him this sum for this deal to get done. And there was a lot of information being sputtered when this process was happening. The fact of the matter is this: the Lakers brand should not be confused for what the Lakers job is right now. And right now, that job is far from a great one in the NBA. One that, since Phil Jackson, you've had 6 head coaches, none have made it past year 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure he's looking at Frank Vogel, Darvin Ham, even the Mike Brown stint, and it's like, yeesh, maybe not for me right now. I do, on the college side of it, one reason people thought he might leave was not just the Lakers being a glamour franchise, but also because of the instability of college basketball and the landscape shifting so much. He's specifically in the Big East, a conference that's built around basketball now. How important was this for the future of the Big East, like remaining a big conference that's important, winning championships in college sports?
It's massive for the Big East. And it's no secret that the conference is deep in talks right now for whatever their next media rights deal will look like. Well, if Dan Hurley's a part of that matters. That's more buzz, that's more money, that's more ratings. That doesn't take a rocket scientist. If he leaves, that hurts the conference severely because he's the face of college basketball right now. When you've won the last 2 titles, you have earned that right. He's in a market in Connecticut, a brand that matters. They are a blue blood. They've won 6 championships since 1999. Sure, you might think of Duke and Kentucky before them, but if you look at the success, for the Lakers example of the brand and the actual results not matching, it's quite the opposite for UConn. You know, they might not be the first brand you thought of 2 or 3 years ago, but 6 titles in a quarter of a century, more than anybody else in that span of time, that's going to create what they have reached, and that is blue blood status. So this is huge for the Big East. The Big East has the most buzz it's had in a long time because Rick Pitino's at St. John's. Ed Cooley made this compelling move to go from Providence down to Georgetown. They were abysmal this past year. They will not be as bad this year. Villanova, with what Jay Wright built, that was almost the type of thing where even though they've been down recently, guys, when you win 2 titles out of 3 years, you almost have a grace period off of that, and your brand is able to just survive off of what you've been able to win here recently, which this league has accounted for 4 of the last 8 national championships. So you can't tell the full story of college basketball unless you talk about the Big East.
We appreciate your Georgetown optimism as we're down here in D.C., and one of our producers, I'm sure, is grinning in the green room because it's been grim around here for a while. And it's tough for rarely do you say it's tough for a private school, but going up against the money that potentially UConn could have, it's a tough spot to be in. And although we're all happy that Dan Hurley's leaving, I don't think
staying.
We're all happy that Dan Hurley's staying. I don't think Georgetown is particularly happy.
That's a great point in this. A lot of the narratives have been, for people that I respect, that Dan Hurley would be leaving college basketball for the NBA because he's tired of college basketball and the climate. Well, take a number in the deli line. There's a bunch of coaches that are upset about the climate. But you can both say that you don't like the climate of college basketball and that there's fixing that has to happen and will happen. It's going to happen. I don't know what exactly it will look like, but we're going to head into a world where it looks different. And perhaps there's contracts down the road at a certain point. But you could both say that you don't like the climate and that at UConn, you have a distinct advantage in your league, in your area of the country, and where you sit in college basketball over everybody else. The Big East is filled with schools that when you have a need for money, throughout history of Villanova, Georgetown, St. John's, Providence, what's the common factor? you probably had to go to a priest or a nun or both to be able to get that money signed off of, right? It's old school basketball. There's been documentaries done on it. At UConn, they don't have to battle those things. They're a state school. So when the governor says, I'm going to give the coach the money to make him the highest paid coach, just plummet that state deficit a little bit more. It is what it is. What's the difference at that point if it means that you get to be the best college basketball program in the state? You're making it back in advertising and buzz and revenue and all that. This led Good Morning America today, this story of him staying in stores. So the point is that UConn doesn't have to battle all these other things. I would argue Hurley's staying at UConn for the opposite reason of everybody saying that he would leave. Because he enjoys life at UConn. He is king of the hill. He has every resource available, and he could have a statue built for him. If he goes for a three-peat next year, they'll start building it for him in stores.
All right. Couple things before I let you go. One, congratulations. You were the first one to get that he was staying. You beat out all these other reporters, if I'm right. So congratulations on that. A little bit of buttering you up now that in order to set you up to go out on a limb a little bit, you went down a path that this show likes to visit a lot. It's what's the future of college sports going to be? Because it feels like it's a bit a shambles. So, given that Charlie and I have both made predictions about what we think it's going to be like, but given that you are much closer to it and have some insight, what is your projection for how college sports is going to eventually settle?
It's a terrific topic. There's so many storylines to it. I will try to dissect it into just a couple of major themes that I think are important to consider here. Number one, this report of revenue sharing, and that each school will distribute, $22 million. Well, the biggest topic with this is Title IX. Will these resources have to be distributed equally amongst sports? It is my thought process that is not going to have to happen, okay? Because I think that we're gonna get to a point where it just is point blank that, and this is not to offend the athlete, but that there's a difference between the top basketball player at a school and the revenue generation that they create versus a top swimmer at a school. It's just part of the reality of money and part of the reality of this college sports conundrum that we face. Scholarships, they're going to be the bare minimum. There's going to be no scholarship limits across these sports. College baseball has the College World Series, okay? Mm-hmm. In 2 weeks, they're going to change this, that you're allowed to have 40 some odd scholarships. These other schools can't compete with that. They can't. So, but by the same token, it's not going to be about what you get in scholarship. It's going to be how much money can I make in addition to that? What is the revenue sharing? What does that look like? I'm told by several schools, they're not going to be able to afford $22 million. What I just talked about in the Big East, Villanova's, they don't have $22 million. And they've got a lot. They got a lot of money, but they don't have $22 million lying around just to hand out. Some of these schools will make a hybrid system, where they'll distribute $12 million. They will package it down from $22 million and get to a place that's middle ground. Here's another big thing to consider, and it's happening. It's going to happen. I think it's going to happen this summer. Who dips into private equity? Who makes the move to private equity to generate the money? Some people out there say you're dancing with the devil. Newsflash. If it's the only way, get your dancing shoes out because you better start figuring out a way to dance. What is happening right now? I was at an NIL event this past weekend, and one of the people giving money to NIL said point blank, I'd like to see how the money's getting distributed across the roster. Coaches are going to have to be willing to solicit that information to the people that are giving the most money, because for them to survive, those people are now going to be looped in. It's a business. It's pay for play. What has to happen for us to find some sort of a structural road is two things. Number one, if you're not college football or college basketball, you have to find an avenue where your sport is just overseen by someone at the top. Softball is just overseen by the U.S. Softball Coaches Association. Right. Soccer is overseen by United States Soccer, and not the NCAA. The NCAA has no role anymore. They just don't. Let's acknowledge the reality, or we choose Not to. That's number one. And number two, college sports leaders, whoever those people look like, have to make serious concessions that athletes are no longer amateurs, and they have to say, here's what a unionized system could look like. Here's what collective bargaining looks like. Let's get contracts into place because we can no longer have 2,200 transfers in the portal during the college basketball offseason, or over 1,000 transfers in the portal, whatever the number is, in the college football offseason. That's got to end. For that to end, for us to get some level of sanity, people got to acknowledge what the truth is and put documentation into place that allows for actual contracts and actual structure happening. Because right now, everyone's like, college sports is pro sports. No. In pro sports, there's a system in place. Right now in college, there is no system. It's a bunch of people. It's like that SpongeBob meme when he's running around in his brain with fire and papers burning. Somebody's got to speak up and say, enough is enough. We've made mistakes for years. Let's start charting a new path. But as you both know, change in college sports is like a dinosaur system. That has to change.
John Fanta, Fox Sports, college sports, machine gun, Gatling gun of information.
Legend.
Yeah, that was incredible. We appreciate you. I'm not going to ask you to come on again. I'm going to tell you that we must have you on again. Thank you so much. Enjoy, hopefully, some quiet time before the college sports season starts again and basketball season starts again. But yeah, we'll have you back sometime soon, I hope. Thank you.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you.
Up next, Domonique Foxworth Show Hall of Famer, Wosny Lambre. Charlie's jealous of my butt, I'll have you know.
Domonique
stared
at his visage in the camera and said, I have a good butt, and then turned around and popped it a little bit at the camera. It was a mini pop.
I'm proud of you, Charlie. That is how you slice a story right there. Spice it up.
Are
we
pop. Talking about a Kyle Lowry level or something different?
Nah, because Kyle Lowry is hard to appreciate because there's a lot, like,
dude.
That's fair.
Speak for yourself.
Nah, I got a sprinter's booty. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with having a sprinter's booty. It's all right. Don't be jealous. This is not how you did this on purpose. This is not how we want to I guess we don't need to introduce Wosny. Wosny, if you listen to the Domonique Foxworth Show, you know the Hall of Famer, Wosny Lambre. He's joining us. We're going to do some NBA stuff, but I think the place to start.
My feet up on the table.
You comfy
I
as
didn't
hell,
know it started yet.
Comfy as hell. Put your feet off my table.
It's called a cold open, Charlie. That's what we call that in the business.
Yeah, it's a hot open when I'm here. But let's start with a little bit of Dan Hurley from the NBA perspective. Charlie, where you want to start, buddy?
Yeah. Woz, to you. You heard the news, Dan Hurley turns down the glamour franchise, Los Angeles Lakers. We just heard about this from the college perspective from John Fanta. But what does it say to you about the Lakers job that Dan Hurley turned it down?
It doesn't say anything to me about the Lakers job at all. I think it says something about Laker management. In the sense that oftentimes they go after coaches and things don't work out. I'm sure you guys will remember the Ty Lue fiasco where they lowballed the guy. And so he turned down their offer. I think people think of the Lakers as a glamour franchise, but for better and for worse, they're one of the last mom and pop operations in existence, meaning the Buss family operates this thing and Dr. Buss's kids, this is their income. This is how they pay their bills, is via the Lakers franchise. It's not like other teams where it's like hedge fund guys and private equity guys, or the Clippers who, their owner is a Microsoft quadrillionaire, or Joe Tsai made his money in other businesses, the Nets owner. Like, that's not who the Lakers are. And so oftentimes, man, they're cutting corners financially. In terms of who they hire for management positions, in terms of who they let into the fold of who gets to make management type decisions, right? It's Kobe's agent. It's Kurt Rambis, a former player. It's his wife. Like, they operate this thing as a family business. And I think that's why sometimes when their hiring stuff comes up, it could seem a little janky or not as corporate as other teams. I think that's why.
Yeah, I think the family business point is one that people have brought up and how it pertains to their ability to pay going forward, not only for players but for coaches, and willingness to go into the apron, which they have been willing to do in recent years, but maybe less willing to do going forward. But I think you touched on something that's hugely important. And my view of all this is, my guess is that it's been viewed, at least, that they lowballed Dan Hurley also on this offer. But my guess is it wasn't the money that scares him away as much as it's the point you were referencing is they got their hands in this. Like, a lot of people got their hands in this. And I don't necessarily think that Dan Hurley wants his NBA future dependent on what Rob Pelinka can do in the offseason. His legacy dependent on whether Kurt Rambis got ideas or not. I think when you have a certain amount of leverage and power, you want to get the perfect situation, and that is not a perfect situation. It's a lot of attention, a lot of pressure, and not as much control.
I'm surprised you guys are taking such a not cynical view of what happened between Dan Hurley and the Lakers.
I have a cynical view. I have it sitting here.
Have you guys ever heard of John Calipari? Like, this happened literally every 2 years while he was at Kentucky. He'd pretend to be interested in some NBA job, and lo and behold, Kentucky would pop up with a brand new deal that was way richer than his last one. That seems to me what happened with Dan Hurley and the Lakers, and I think it was mutually beneficial in two ways. One, obviously, Dan Hurley gets a raise from UConn, probably higher than he would have, ordinarily got after back-to-back championships. I think he was going to get a raise anyway, but, it's always nice. You guys have, looked for jobs and had offers before in your own life. Whenever somebody else is willing to come in with a bigger bag, your company magically finds some more money under the seat cushions, right? And so I think that's what happened. And I think on the Lakers side, I think Pelinka and his sort of regime has been extra sensitive about the perception of how the front office operates ever since they made that god-awful Westbrook deal. And I think this was more good PR for the Lakers management in terms of them doing a thorough head coaching search, and that they didn't just give the job to JJ Redick. And so it looks like, they're doing their due diligence. They tried to get this hotshot candidate out of the college ranks, a guy who has an incredible reputation for his actual coaching acumen and not just recruiting great players to his program. A guy who their best player has already praised on his very popular podcast about X's and O's. And, they get to look like they're doing their job as a management situation where they're getting other coaches involved and not just handing the keys to JJ Redick, again, who is LeBron's podcast co-host. And so to me, I'm not going to disrespect anybody's reporting here. I'm not going to say that this was all smokescreen and smoke and mirrors, but I'm not going to pretend that I've never seen this happen before.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen lots of coaches run this play. It's a
Jim
normal
Harbaugh.
play.
It's the Harbaugh.
But to that point,
eventually,
where is he now? And I was going to say the same thing about a lot of the college coaches that we talk about doing this. They actually do pull the trigger. And I think that if it were some random job, not a prestige franchise, then maybe I would have given this a lot less credence. You might be 100% right, but Dan Hurley himself tells people that eventually he wants to get to the NBA. So I think it's a realistic opportunity, something that we should take serious, and something that is going to happen at some point.
For Waz's Knicks.
Yeah. Oh, Waz. For your Knickerbockers. You think he's going to end up there? That's what people are saying, right?
He's definitely a Northeast tri-state area guy through and through. I mean, just the other day, the man was at the Garden watching Billy Joel, for Christ's sakes. Like, does it get more native tri-state area white person than a Billy Joel concert at the Garden? Come on now.
Hold on. I want to try to outdo you.
Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
Oh,
Bruce
the boss?
Springsteen?
Oh, yeah.
Or Wu-Tang.
Fair. I'm picking up what you're putting down there, Dominique.
Don't get much Northeastern white than going to a Wu-Tang show at the Garden. Anyway, I'm sorry. You were going to make a much more interesting point than that.
No, I think that's what makes it genius, right? He's already said that he would like to coach professionals. He's obviously a hyper-competitive guy. The NBA is the highest level of basketball that is played in all the world. How could he not want to coach there? But, you know, I'm not dumb enough to think that he needs to jump into this thing as at the first turn, especially if he can get competitive salaries at a place that he's already cemented himself as a living legend. He's already done it. He's done it, and they're going to pay him to do so. He's very comfortable. Like, I'm not surprised that he's not super thirsty to already chase these NBA dreams, because he's a fairly young guy when you consider head coaches anyway. And, you know, there'll be plenty of opportunities down the road to chase this when he wants to again.
That's the fair point. I think that I wasn't taking into consideration before this is that there will be plenty of opportunities. And I think Charlie was making the point that Billy Donovan had some pretty bad seasons long after.
It was 8 years after his back-to-back championships he left for the NBA.
And he had close to a 500 record, I think, at that point when he ended up leaving the NBA. So the jobs will be there, and it's kind of absurd for me to think that the jobs wouldn't be there while it appeared that he was in competition with J.J. Redick for the job. Like, I imagine that he's going to have, whenever he wants to make that leap, it's not like my view of it is very, I think, tainted by the way NFL coaches are hired. NBA coaches is kind of a vibe sometimes. You got the vibe, we'll give you a job.
Also, if you guys remember, Billy Donovan turned down that Orlando Magic job. That was allegedly a done deal. It was a done deal. He's just going to go down the road to Orlando from Gainesville. And if this thing was signed, still delivered, then he changed his mind and eventually ended up in the NBA, where he's had a damn long go of it, man. Like, I remember at the time, a lot of people I talked to thought he would flame out pretty quickly in the NBA, and he's made it through. And so, I don't know. I guess I'm not surprised by any of these outcomes at all. Like, honestly, when the guy who was allegedly the front runner was the whole time, allegedly since the Darvin Ham firing, becomes the third person interviewed. And then after this interview, I'll think about it. I mean, guys, the writing was on the wall after that. The idea that this guy could get on a plane after having met with the Lakers brass without that job, without them having him, locked in as the next coach. I felt like the writing's been on the wall with that.
So, can I put on my tinfoil hat for a second?
Uh-oh. Let's do it. I'm here for it.
So, there's a very famous Lakers player named LeBron James, who I think it's going to be very hard for any coach to look him in the face and say, I don't want to coach that guy. Even if he's, 1,000 years old like he actually is. That guy's also a free agent this summer. Do you think any little birdie got in Danny Hurley's ear and was like, LeBron, he's out of there. You're going to have an unhappy 7-foot hospital case on your team and Anthony Davis. And outside of that, your best asset is Austin Reeves. Does a tiny part of you think that this is an indication that LeBron is out of there and maybe going to be the starting small forward for the Dallas Mavericks next year?
I don't see that.
I have to respond to this.
I think Hurley not showing up, after it's been said that JJ's the guy and JJ's clearly LeBron's guy, to me, that would seem like a bigger indication of the opposite, that LeBron is going to be there. And I'm somebody who, as a LeBron watcher, a expert, so to speak, in the field, I've given myself a PhD in LeBronology. After that trade deadline, all of that, hemming and hawing from both him and management. Our guy, Brian Windhorst, putting out a report that, look, LeBron just wants a max 3-year extension this summer. Then very shortly after, my former colleague and very good buddy, Jovan Buha, puts out a report that the Lakers are completely fine with offering LeBron his max extension. It seems like that's where this is going. And so, I'm Until I see it, I don't believe LeBron is going anywhere. Everything seems to be pointing in the direction of him, staying put, being completely happy, content, doesn't really care about, I need to maximize championship potential of every season. I think he's just cool with being in LA and fine with ending the career there.
Thank you for ripping off the tinfoil hat and stomping on it. I appreciate that.
LeBron did tweet yesterday at Cuffs saying it was fake news that he didn't want to still compete for championships.
Okay. I didn't trust all LeBron tweets. More importantly, what do you think is Dan Hurley's favorite Wu-Tang song? It's got to be
his favorite album is definitely the 36 Chambers, right? He's definitely not one of those guys that's I love the second one or the most recent one. He's definitely
not a Triumph guy. I got him in headphones going, I bomb atomically. Socrates philosophy.
No, he definitely loves the song, the album, but he's definitely I'm 36 Chambers. I got the album the first day it came out.
All the way back. And he liked to say that he liked to name the obscure members to show y'all. It's like, I'm a big Inspector Deck guy.
Of course, yeah. He's telling guys at his bar that, he had a Capadonna phase at one point. We know the vibes. He's definitely one of those guys. I like rap, but I'm mostly into 90s stuff. He's one of those guys.
That's great. All right, let's talk some finals. Let's pivot a tiny bit to the finals. We have news. About 40 minutes before we recorded this, Shams tweeted that Kristaps Porzingis is day to day with a rare injury to his left leg. It is, I'll probably butcher this. I've never heard of this. A torn medial retinaculum, which is allowing for a dislocation of his posterior tibialis tendon. He has an ankle injury.
Okay.
Lower leg injury in his left leg. This is coming while Boston has comfortably won the first two games of the series and looked like the better team. How do you think the Mavericks can get back into the NBA Finals?
This Boston Celtics have been plus 32 in KP's 44 minutes in two games.
Insane.
He's clearly been the decisive factor in putting Boston over the top of Dallas. And if he's at all limited, that's a big problem for Boston, and it's the slight daylight that Dallas would need to get back in this series. First of all, Kyrie Irving's going to have to make some shots. I think Dallas is going to have to be smarter about taking care of the ball. They're going to have to be smarter about defensive rotations, keeping Luka, off of islands against Boston's best players. They're going to have to be better at their defensive navigation of Boston's attack. But if KP is hobbled and limited, that is the door cracking open for Dallas to get back into this thing. Because again, to reiterate, Boston has been utterly dominant in Kristaps' minutes so far in this series.
Yeah, playing out how having Kristaps out there could impact the game. I do think my initial reaction when I hear that news is they're still much better than them. But I do think that there are a few linchpin characters in this that makes them so malleable on offense and defense that makes them hard to beat. And I think that Kristaps is obviously, if not the guy in that spot, is one of them. I guess Holiday's ability to shoot combined with his defense is also a big factor. But I can't think of very many players. But if you pull Holiday, you have guys who can do, White can do a Holiday imitation. Having them both on the same floor, on the floor at the same time is valuable. But there isn't. That's why they call him the unicorn. There's a few Kristapses in the league. They don't have another one. They're now Al Horford territory, which he's good, but he doesn't impact the offense or defense, frankly, the way that Kristaps does.
So Big Al has been pretty damn good in this series so far. Those times that he's been left on an island against Kyrie or Luka, he's held up pretty nicely. But guess what? He's only being asked to do that in spurts. He's not being asked to do that for 36, 40 minutes a night because, believe me, if we get into Luke Cornett territory here, it could be scary hours for Boston. But what KP's done is the Mavericks just cannot guard Boston when he's out there. KP's presence allows for these wide open driving lanes where Brown, Tatum, White, and Jrue Holiday have had just open lanes. They have to hug KP at the 3-point line. even out to 28 feet, right? And which just doesn't allow for people to send help from any direction. It's a legitimate 5 out. And so Tatum and Brown, they've been having their way, in terms of what Dallas has done with their perimeter defenders. And then on the other end, Porzingis has been a legitimate deterrent at the rim. This man looks like Mutombo out there. It's ridiculous.
And he's been comfortable, as you mentioned earlier, he's been comfortable in switches. That's one of the special things about their defense is that they can switch everyone. As you mentioned, Luke Kornet, I'm not feeling confident about Kornet being switched on to any of those top guys, and that is something that they are going to hunt.
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing that Boston has been able to essentially eradicate Dallas's transition offense, and those are loud plays by Porzingis when he's in there, and in stopping 2-on-1 fast breaks by himself by protecting the rim. It's pretty spectacular. That in the corner threes, and I just wonder if Boston still will just go small and force Dallas to not be able to play those big guys all the time.
Good question. We'll find out. The real question though is, how you feeling about Joe Mazzulla right now, Wosny?
I mean, I'll say this, their game plan has been, one, sound, and two, they're executing it to a T. The idea of look, we're going to switch everything. We're going to force Kyrie and Luka to beat us one-on-one. We're going to stay home on every single Dallas Mavericks shooter. We're not going to put ourselves in rotation. We're going to leave these guys on an island. And Jrue Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, these guys have held up beautifully against Kyrie specifically. I think we saw Luka in game 2 got cooking, and Boston got out of the heavy switching. They had a couple of times where they sent blitzes. They had a couple of times where KP got into a drop coverage, and Luka made him pay. Luka was excellent in game 2, but he was not, a supernova. Kyrie, on the other hand, they've had absolutely no problem guarding this guy face up, one-on-one, not allowing all of those corner threes that Dallas has been so expert in generating when they got defenses into rotation, not allowing any of these lob passes that have been a staple for Dallas's entire playoff run against every other opponent. The game plan has been solid, and these guys have executed. And I think the other thing, man, that I didn't expect, especially in game 2, after the threes weren't falling, this team is playing desperate. They're playing like a team that's been there before, knows that they have to execute on literally in the high 95, 96% of your possessions in a finals atmosphere. They look like a team that understands that you can't play around when you get to this stage, and they are executing at an incredible level. And I think Mazzulla deserves the credit, even if he hit me with Jesus freak stuff every now and again in a press conference.
I mean, he's hilarious.
Man is entertaining. His post game, if they win the championship, he's gonna give us some gold.
He's unpredictable. I'll say that. I never know what's gonna come out of that man's mouth whenever there's a mic in front of him.
Waz, do you owe Jrue Holiday an apology? Offensive.
He was a Jrue hater?
He's not giving an offensive factor.
I'm not a Jrue hater. I was a little disturbed at the victory lap that the collective NBA media threw for Boston when they landed Jrue Holiday. Because, I remember quite distinctly Jrue Holiday's shortcomings in previous playoffs, particularly on the offensive end. However, on this team, he doesn't have to be some kind of creator, offensive driver. Yeah. He gets to be a cleanup guy. He gets to clean up, finish possessions, and not initiate them or start them. And he's been, guess what? He's been excellent at the task. That sequence of defense, three-point making, stripping people at half court at the end of the fourth quarter when they sealed the game by going up 14 points against Dallas in game 2. That was Jrue Holiday basically detonating. Okay, this guy is not just on the offense, sure, he's doing cleanup plays. On defense, he's just blowing stuff up. He is just straight up being a playmaker and eraser. He deserves the praise that he's getting. I'm not getting on his finals MVP bandwagon with the rest of these people. Dallas is gearing their defense towards putting out fires created by Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But Jrue Holiday in his role has been a superstar and has been excellent. And no, I'm not going to apologize for having takes.
I mean, that's it's amazing seeing him as a fourth or fifth option, depending on who's out there.
That was the point that listening to you, it's something that I should mark down in my head when we're doing projections going forward. So we don't appreciate how exhausting basketball is because guys hardly ever look tired. Mm-hmm. And even like when you're asking a lot of them, with the exception of Luka asking to come out early in that game, but at the end of games, guys don't look tired. But they clearly are impacted by fatigue. And that's one thing that we're seeing in this game is Jrue Holiday does not have to be the primary defender on the best offensive player all the time, like he would have to be in some situations. He does not have to try to initiate offense just about ever. And so when you get down to the fourth quarter, you're going to get a slightly better version of Jrue Holiday. You get a slightly better version of everyone except for Jason Tatum.
Yeah, I've already gone on record and been like, we need to cut Jason Tatum some slack. Like, at the end of the day, he is being tasked with generating the thrust of Boston's offense. It's him creating getting those help defenders to commit, which is putting Dallas in rotation, which is getting Jrue Holiday these wide open layups, these wide open threes. It's Tatum that's creating that. Yes, I'd like to see him finish some layups at the cup. Yes, I'd like to see him make a step back or two and not shoot 6 of 22. But one, he's excellent on defense. 2, he's playing an incredible floor game. I know that's not what people want to see from him. People want to see him drop 40. But listen, man, the second that these guys are committing to him, he's getting the ball out, spraying it, and he's creating great opportunities. My memory is long enough. I was in the building for a few of those finals games in 2022. That man looked like a pumpkin. He was horrible in 2022. It's just a fact. He's playing way better than he did in 22. Like, a lot of times these drives were turning into turnovers or just the most horrible, like, I'm talking about Hail Mary prayer of a shot that he was putting up against Golden State. That's just not been the case in this series. He's been better. He's driving the success. He's making Dallas's defense look bad. Yes, the shooting percentage needs to be upped, but I think he's been pretty damn good, honestly.
I mean, I'm with you. All that stuff is smart and accurate and right. Give us one game, man. Give us one game. Just give us one game where you cook, right? Wosny, as level-headed as you want to be, you also recognize he gonna have to cook for us once.
For sure. And the thing is, throughout the playoffs, we've been watching guys who we think are on Tatum's level have these kind of games in big moments, whether it be Ant Edwards. Forget about Luka in the closing game against the Wolves in the first quarter, where this man he looked like an alien from outer space. It was ridiculous, right? We've seen guys have like Jalen Brunson for the Knicks, where he just put the team on his back. Embiid in the first, like, we've seen guys put Jokic, I think it was game 5, where he just made Rudy Gobert look horrible. Like, we've seen all of these guys.
I just want one game like that from Jason.
Yes. I understand that. Jason. I understand that. We would like to see Jason Tatum do, I put the team on my back, though, just one time. But, I don't think he's going to need to for them to win this series ultimately.
That's fine. Well, we appreciate you putting the show on your back, so I don't have to shoot that much. I can fumble down the lane and dribble the ball out of bounds, and we still get a dub. Thank you, Wosny. That was another great episode of Domonique Foxworth Show. Thank you very much, Charlie, the Vanilla Snack, for all your contributions. Appreciate John Fanta for joining us. And, of course, Wosny Lambre was here, and all the great producers, Megan, Serafina, Brian, Kevin, Taz, and I love you, Podville.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.